The trajectory of most Holocaust survivor stories, biographies, memoirs is fairly well known now. It starts off with life before the Nazi era, growing up, what family life was like. Then the noose tightening, you know, with the imposition of the Nuremberg laws and Jews' legal and civil rights being stripped away one by one. Then herded into ghettos and then deported to the camps. Liberation by the Allies. And building a new life in America, in Israel, wherever. That's kind of the familiar trajectory. The concern that I have there is that it's a cliche. We impose that structure on the stories of Holocaust survivors because it helps us to have a mechanism for making sense of something that made no sense. The Holocaust was a challenge to our values, our vocabulary, our sense of civilization, our sense of what it means to be a human being. Everything was turned upside down and topsy-turvy. Creating a structure to a survivor's story says more about our need for sanity, our need for structure, our need for closure, than it does about what really happened to them. I've known some survivors who were interviewed by certain archives who were very disappointed because they felt manipulated. That people came in, they tried to kind of force them into this familiar trajectory, and then at the end, let's take a picture of you with your family, you know, as though it's happy ever after. And it's not happy ever after. This is a living memory for people who went through it. There are so few left now. But if you watch the video testimonies, if you read the transcripts of their testimony, you don't hear stories of heroism and bravery. You hear stories about the unheroic things that they were forced to do just to survive. So, in the case of Siggi Wilzig and the book Unstoppable, the first quarter of the book is pretty much Siggi's experiences during the war years in Auschwitz and elsewhere in his own words. I took the words from the transcript of his testimony, and with the help of his son Ivan, just let him tell his story and just not get in the way. Where I had to come in as a writer was after that first quarter, when he leaves Europe and comes to America. Now my job is to get the composite image from all the people who knew him, conduct the interviews, and create a storyline that's engaging. I mean, a book, if it's not engaging, doesn't matter whether you have an important message to say, no one's going to read it. So that's where, having some innate language skills helps, certainly. But I think it's more a matter of listening, an ability to set aside those skills and just to listen carefully to what the story is telling you. So that was, for me, what was, I think, different about Siggi's story, is that it's not the standard trajectory. You know, if you read the book carefully, there's this secondary narrative, which is that he never got over those nightmares. And if he was this volcanic personality, perhaps some of that was reflective of his having to find ways to survive. He had to be cunning like a fox. He called them fox-like instincts. He credited the Almighty. He was a very religious man. So he said, if I'm alive, it's not because I'm a great brain, I'm not a genius, it was the hand of God. But still, he found these ways of, he'd overhear a guard saying, we need bricklayers. Siggi took great risk. He would walk over and say, oh, I've had 4 years as a bricklayer. He never had any experience of bricklaying. But he found ways to stay alive. We can conjecture that he took those same kind of intuitions, those survival skills, and applied them to business. Now, he was never psychoanalyzed. I'm not a therapist, so this is all conjecture. But the point is that I think if there's something that engages readers in this story, it's just watching this guy go. He had the sharpest self-analytical tools of any human being I think I've ever known. His ability to size somebody up in 10 seconds was breathtaking because his life depended on it in the camps. He could tell what your motives were that fast. So he knew which way you were going to go, and he got there before you. Watching that happen is just an amazing thing.